Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, I have another great guest. As our ongoing subscriber knows, often on this podcast, I will be sharing ideas and insights about professional relationships and helping you excel through business networking with lots of best practices out there. Occasionally, however, well, more than occasionally, a lot of times, I should say, I interview subject matter experts. These are authors, speakers, thought leaders, and social scientists, and these people share their knowledge to help us with our relationships and help us do better at networking. Today, I have on with me Heather Bennett. She's a best-selling author. She's a marketing strategist and a personal brand coach. And she is on the board of directors and co-chair and CEO founder of her marketing company. She helps executives and entrepreneurs strategically connect their mission and brands to their customers and stakeholders, and ultimately the bottom line. She's the best-selling author of Fun and Fulfilling Career One Question at a Time. Fun and Fulfilling Careers One Question at a Time, which is a guide for personal branding and career development, which can be found on Amazon, much like lots of things these days. Heather, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Frank.
So give us a little background, how you got into this. You guys share your story with us, if you would.
Sure. I originally actually started in research and development and met a lot of marketing and brand people there. Decided to get my MBA because I fell in love with the concept of brands and what, the connection that they would make with people, and worked in consumer packaged goods for a number of years for very large brands that almost everyone has in their homes, which is great. And on the side had this side hustle helping people with their careers. Somebody would say, could you just talk to my brother, my neighbor, my coworker? They need someone to really lay out what to do with their career or how to fix their business. And this was 20 years ago. So I applied all of my brand marketing knowledge towards fixing their career or business problems. And that developed into personal branding. So since then, I've been doing a lot of personal branding coaching and helping, entrepreneurs and executives especially understand how to use their personal brand to get ahead in their career.
That's interesting. It's I'm just guessing, but I have the sense that you probably ran into people who were branding experts in business who were horrible at their own brand, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, and it is funny. It's hard to work on your own brand.
Yeah.
It's one of those where it's much easier to help others than to work on your own brand. So, and it does take time.
Well, I mean, absolutely
set aside time to do it.
Well, I find that for myself. It's like I'll be talking to somebody about, hey, you ought to say this about yourself. And the reason you ought to say this is for this, and this reason. And in mid-sentence, our brains kind of work on different tracks. There's what's coming out of my mouth and what's going on in my head. And in my head, it's like, oh, you dummy, you're not even doing that, right? I'll have these moments of clarity where it's like, oh my gosh, kind of writing a note to self. I need to do this too. So yeah, I think it's probably true of, the estate planning attorney doesn't have a will. The financial advisor is in worse financial shape than anybody, so on and so forth. I
view it as keeping you on your toes because I'm fixing or adding or changing my website on a weekly basis. My LinkedIn profile is far from static because every person I work with or help, or everything I learn, through webinars and whatnot about how to build your brand online, I'm constantly, using my own to work on, to hone, to get better at. So yeah, I guess it could go two ways, but you're right. Sometimes I don't have time to do the strategy that would probably help me. But at the same point, I like being pushed to test and to see, what works. What is the algorithm going to do this week?
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I just recorded a podcast and talking about people's 30-second commercials, and it's similar in nature. I said, don't be like Charlie Brown's teacher. If you remember, Charlie Brown's teacher was wah, 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 wah. Then people have these commercials, or, their sticks or whatever they're going to say about themselves. And they're good. They're well polished, but they're so rote that they just almost become white noise. And in that podcast, I said, I have been working on mine for 30 years. What I'm saying is, I'm constantly tweaking it. Or there's a better way to say it, or I should do this, or, and I look back in time, and there were times when I was talking about myself. It's like, what, people are really nice. Nobody ever said anything, but that was horrible. What I was doing was horrible, and nobody ever called me out, and they should have called me out. So, well, let's talk about personal branding, a strong personal brand. Products are brands. There's Tide detergent, there's Lay's potato chips, there's, we can go on and on and on. And those are really strong, and people don't necessarily think of themselves as brands, and we should. I guess this, is it easy to convince people, or how easy is it to convince people that, hey, you are a brand? And that's really the first step, right? And then the second step is, okay, yeah, now I'm a brand. What do I do with it? It seems like you have both those problems too. I just want to get a job. Just help me get a job,
Yeah.
But it seems to me that the first step is just convincing them that there's something there.
It is really a common misconception that you don't have a brand. And if you're not an impressive celebrity or influencer, that you don't need to have a personal brand, which is not true. If you are trying to achieve a career or a business goal, you need to have a personal brand because you need to be memorable. I think one of your former guests, Michael Roderick, talked about that, the idea of being referable, having a referable brand. I translate that into being a memorable brand, because if you want to be referred, to get that job, to get in front of that hiring manager, or to get that business deal, people have to remember who you are and why you're unique and why it's important that they talk to you. So without a personal brand, without being able to describe who you are, what you bring to the table, what makes you unique and more able to be successful in that capability, whether it's a career, a job specifically, or a business deal, if you don't have that sense of clarity, you're not going to accomplish your career or business goal.
Yeah, it's I guess in thinking about it, and I don't know to what extent you wrestle with, but if you ask anybody, how are you known around the office? Everybody's going to have an answer, right? Well, I'm known as hardworking. I'm known as the person who's there first thing in the morning, or I'm known as the person who's always there on Saturday, or whatever it might be. There's a brand right there.
Yes.
And so when you're going to make a transition, whether you're forced into transition or voluntarily going into a transition, you can kind of look at that and say, okay, yeah, that's my brand. Now, some of that might not package as well, just depending, or you might not be comfortable. People tell me, well, I'm hardworking. Okay, yeah, I'm sure you are, right? I'm sure you are. Who am I to know? Who am I to challenge that? But that's an assertion that's easily made by other people. So that could be part of your brand, but that's one of a four-legged stool or a three-legged stool. So
exactly.
Now, what are some things you'll coach people on with respect to their brand? What does it depend upon where they're going? I'll let you talk.
No, so I believe it really starts with self-awareness. You need to know where you are right now and what your skills are, your talents, your capability, what you said earlier, what you're known for around the office, why you're the go-to person for certain situations. And that's the first step. And then at that point, you can start looking to see what are the potential options for you in terms of a job, in terms of, a type of business to create or run if you're an entrepreneur. And you have to do the self-awareness part first, because without knowing what you're bringing to the table, you won't know what options are even available to you. And if it's something that you don't necessarily have the skills or abilities to do now or the experience, well, then that tells you what you should do. Do you need to go back to school? Do you need to get a certification? Do you need to find a mentor in that area to be an apprentice to, so that you can learn whatever that is? There's many routes to get there. But if you don't know that you don't know that, you're never going to get there.
Right. To what extent do you get pushback from people?
That's an interesting question.
Well, we all swim in our own. We can't see the water we're swimming in, right? So
yeah.
Again, you can. I'm hardworking,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
the methods that I use, because they are what I would call very easy chunks and bites. It's not, this shouldn't be a painful process. So, it's one question. The reason it's one question at a time is I slowly walk people through, a sense of self-discovery and a way to learn this knowledge over time, so that, they understand why and believe why what they're discovering about their self is real and true. And there's, it's understandable. But honestly, the biggest pushback I get from clients is that they don't have the time to do this. They don't have the time to promote themselves and create the content or the connections or to do the networking. How am I supposed to find the time to network when I'm running a business, when I'm trying to look for a job? And so a lot of the work I do is helping them understand how they spend their time and how to better spend it. So it's creating those really simple strategies and plans that make promoting yourself and promoting your personal brand, looking for a job, much more palatable.
Yeah. I had a stint in corporate America, and reflecting back, there were people who were very good at self-promotion. And I don't mean that in a bad way. And in a way, I'm kind of envious of it. I should have done more of it. And maybe not, I would still be there. I don't know. But at the time, I can remember thinking, oh gosh, I'm not doing that. That's, then you start believing your own press clippings, right? Well, I'm a wonderful person. It's written right here. Well, that's your memo. It's kind of a feedback loop. And so I could see people really having an issue with these, this sort of a thing. Can you give us some examples of some of the questions that you'll ask people? Obviously, there's a book, go buy the book. I don't want you to go through the whole book, but just kind of, where it starts. Does it start in different places for different people? You could take us a little bit through that process.
Certainly. For a lot of people, we have to start at the beginning. And the great thing about having the book is it's actually sped up my process quite a bit, because I can give them homework and say, okay, just read chapter 1, 2, do all the exercises, and then we'll talk. We'll spend, 10, 15 minutes talking about what you've learned about yourself there. We can move a lot faster. In terms of questions I ask, one of the ones I find that's very powerful. So there's two I'm thinking of. One is when you were a child, before you had the responsibilities of mortgages and paying student loans and all the other things that weigh on us as adults, and you had the opportunity to choose how to spend your time. How did you spend your time? What inspired you? What were you passionate about? And then being able to connect that to their current skills and interests and abilities, and be able to find, okay, well, why, what's the through line there? What's the thread that's gone through your entire life that has clearly led you to this point? And how is that through line going to go forward to your next job, your next career? So that would be, I think that's probably the best example of a question that guides you to where you are now.
I'm just reflecting back. I've had one job. Now, high school, I worked part-time jobs, things like that, in college, things like that, but one full-time job. And I remember leaving there and telling my father that I was leaving and going to be self-employed. It didn't matter where I was going, but his response to me was, "I can't believe you went there in the first place. That is so not you."
Wow.
It was an accounting firm. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? No. I guess where I'm driving with it, to what extent do you find people are really just, they're not in love with what they're doing. It's a job.
Yeah. And then I really describe work in two different ways. There's the work you have to do to keep food on your table, a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and all the bills paid. And you have to do that work because that's life. So realistically, however, there's also the work that feeds your soul, that inspires you, that gets you up in the morning, gets you out of bed. Realistically, for most people, I mean, it's great if you can find that in one job or one position. Most of the time, it's difficult for people to do that right now. They may be able to move towards it, make a plan 3 to 5 years down the road, whatever, do that. But for most people, where they are at right now, they need to find that second job, that fulfilling somewhere else. And that could be a volunteer position, a part-time job, starting their own business. It's really exciting to see how many small businesses have started because of us all being online. It's really opened the opportunity for many people. So if you're realistic about the fact that you need to have both of those, a job that pays you so you can live, and a job that you do so that you can live, have energy and passion.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, it's not easy. And I'm totally thankful. Cause it's, I'm not getting religious here, but it's like God had a plan for me. Right. And I had to spend 6 years in public accounting to come out and not be happy, and come out and realize that, okay, I need to do something different. And then just kind of doing what I was doing until I stumbled across the opportunity I have now. Do you help people? Do you work with people in transition? I mean, how somebody who's between things, somebody going to the first thing, does it vary?
Let's see. There's the majority of my clients have been in an industry for a long time, and they're looking for that next step, or they have reached a certain level. They're like VP, director level, and they're ready to jump to that next level, that executive level, whether it's a C-suite or something in that range. And they have been told, or they understood, they need to have a stronger presence online. They need to become key thought leaders in their industry in order to make that jump. So I was gonna say it's always transitions. Every once in a while, I'll get someone in the late 20s range who's had their first career, and they've done well, and they're doing, I think, a very good thing is questioning, okay, is this really where I want to go? And that sounds like your experience, where you worked for that 6 years and really learned accounting, which I'm a big fan of. A good P&L can make business decisions and strategies so much easier. There's so much you can learn in the numbers. Obviously, scientist, I love data, so very always useful. But having that experience to really dedicate yourself for a period of time to an industry, and then to have the presence of mind to stop and say, okay, this is what I've learned. This is what I've experienced about people, about business. What do I do next? So every once in a while, I'll get people in that range too.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Well, the world has changed, obviously. I mean, the internet's changed a lot. I can remember being in my final years in my corporate life. I was a tax consultant, knowing that this wasn't the place, but not knowing enough that what might be, what could be. And there wasn't LinkedIn, where LinkedIn's a beautiful thing. You can get out there and just start asking people questions. Would you please give me 15 minutes of your time? I'd love to learn about what you do, learn about your company. And you really had to do hardcore networking before. And then that was scary because you don't want your boss to find out you were looking, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why
That's still the case.
I know.
That's still the case. I have clients who are very hesitant to talk much beyond what they're doing. They're like, how do I do a strategy where I'm getting myself known, but at the same point, keep my job? Because I haven't figured out, like you said, you get to a point where you know you want something different, but you haven't figured out what that is and even how to get there once you figure it out.
Yeah. And I don't know why that fear's there. I mean, I do. It's like they're going to find out and they're going to fire me. And it's like in reality, knowing what I know now and sitting and, I have somebody who works for me. She's great. I don't want to lose her. If I found out she was looking at something, I'm like, okay, what am I doing wrong? I want to fix this, but we have these fears. But at any rate, it was hard for me to get information. This is the mid 90s. I don't know if there were people out there who did the sort of work you did. I had a guidance counselor in high school, and it was, you like working with numbers, you should be an accountant. You like people, do this, right? There were these buckets, right? There were 5 buckets, and you like medical stuff, and you're a woman, you should be a nurse, right? I mean, it was all very sexist. It was all very, very unscientific. I don't know.
There's a lot of research that goes into finding the right job for someone.
Right.
It's not a quick solution for every person I work with is different, because I want them to be happy and successful at the end of the day. And that's not going to happen if I just give them a blanket answer. You really need to spend the time to get to know the individual and where they fit.
Right. Well, and there's so many options out there that you don't know. Even the guidance counselor has no idea. I'll use my wife as an example. She's got an accounting background, but now she's works in executive compensation. She understands numbers and spreadsheets, a lot of analysis in that, a lot of numbers. It's a perfect fit for her. She can communicate with the accounting people, the finance people, the board of directors, there's a lot of communication she can be the interpreter for. But I would imagine when she was going through school that nobody ever said that was an option. It was just kind of somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, we need this skill set in this seat. And lo and behold, that's where she ended up. And there's probably a lot of people who, same sort of thing. I know a lot of former attorneys who aren't being an attorney anymore. Anyhow, let's shift gears here. I want to talk about your practice. Have you talk a little bit about the types of things you do and how people can get a hold of you. Is this mainly one-on-one? You do group programs as well? I guess share a little bit about your work.
Yeah, no, I mainly do one-on-one coaching, but I do a lot of speaking and give webinars to various groups, especially networking groups, on things like level up on LinkedIn or how to use your personal brand for your career, personal branding in the technology sphere. So in that sense, I'll do it. And I have done a few retreats and workshops as well. So it really depends on the needs if an organization needs someone to come in and really help with that. But most of my work is one-on-one. Yes.
I would imagine it would have to be because everyone's unique. You can't donate or you can't devote time to a group and really hone in on a person. But the group work kind of leads to the individual work, it sounds like. Is that
definitely
fair statement?
Definitely.
Okay. Best way for people to get more information, get a hold of you?
Certainly. My website, which is heatherhbennett.com, or my business website, which has more information and all kinds of discussions, blog posts, and information on social media and personal branding, free for everyone to read, is creativebrandcoach.net.
Okay. I'll get that in the show notes. We'll get that in the show notes. I'm writing a note here. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing with the audience.
I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.